Hello! Welcome back. I hope you're gonna enjoy this video. So, in this video, I'll be talking you through my fall TBR. It's almost fall, it's almost autumn. Autumn or fall is definitely my favorite season. No surprises there. I think like every bookish person's favorite season is fall. This is my fall TBR. These are not all of the books on my fall TBR. I also have some that are just released that I don't own yet, and I'm just gonna talk you through all of the books that are on my fall TBR. I think there are 15 if we're not counting series. If we're not counting series, there are 15 books on my fall TBR. I think that's a decent amount. It leaves some room for different books that I also want to read that aren't out yet or that I haven't discovered yet. And that is not the only thing. I'm also going to be talking you through some recommendations that I want to give you, and I just hope you're going to enjoy this video. I am going to start off with my fall TBR. After that, I'm going to give you some recommendations. So, the first section that we have is fantasy. The first one is Fall, Ruin, and Wrath by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is the author that wrote the Blood and Ash series, and also it's the other series, like the spin-off, like the prequel series, I guess, to Blood and Ash. I read Blood and Ash. I read 2 books in the Shadow and the Ember series. I didn't completely fall in love with the Blood and Ash series. I loved the first and second book, but then the third book went downhill. But I'm really excited to start this series. I think there's only 1 book out in the series yet. It's a fairly new release. I'm not sure how new, but it's fairly new. I've had this on my TBR for a while now. It's also a hardcover. Love me a good hardcover book. And I'm just really excited because I do love Jennifer L. Armentrout's writing style. I love her storytelling. So that's this book. Next we have part 2, 3, and 4. That's 3. Yeah, but you understand me. 2, 3, and 4. In the Zodiac Academy series, I have already read the first book and I didn't completely fall in love with it. I actually hated the bullying that was going on, but I feel like the story has so much potential to be so fucking good. So I was just like, let's put 3 books of the series on my TBR, see what I think of them, and maybe I'll make a video out of reading those. I did really like Zodiac Academy, the first book, The Awakening, but the bullying just really didn't sit right with me. So that was the only reason why I rated it like a 3.5 instead of like a 4 or 4.5. Because if the bullying had been less, I probably would have rated it a 4.5 because I really did enjoy the book. It was very easy to get through. I hope I can get to 3 books in the series. Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. This is part of the Hunger Games series. This is a prequel about Mr. Snow Daddy. I have already seen the movie. It was so good. Like, honestly, I haven't even read 1 book in the Hunger Games series. I wasn't planning on doing that until I watched movie 1, movie 2, and then this movie. I needed to read the books immediately, and I still haven't read them. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. I think the premise of the story is pretty obvious. It's about Emily Wilde, and she's writing an encyclopedia of fairies. And I think there's a romance as well, but apparently, that's what I've heard, the romance isn't that obvious as you would think. So I'm curious to see if I would like this. I kind of have a feeling that I will not like this writing style, but I still want to try it out because I've just heard such positive things about this, and I feel like this is very fall-coded. Then we have Bewitched by Laura Thalassa. I honestly have had this book on my TBR for way too long. It's been there for more than a year, I think. And it's ridiculous. It's very ridiculous. I've read Rhapsodic, another series by this author. I've recently heard some good things about this. So I was like, wait. Because I was so not excited to read this book. But then I heard some positive things about it. And I was like, wait a second. This makes me want to read it. So I've had some encouragement, and that means that I'm going to read it in the fall. I really should read it. I think I'm going to like it. The story is very interesting. It's basically about this woman. I think she awakens like this god or something like that. He thinks that she's his wife, so he wants to kill her. And it just sounds so very interesting, so I'm excited. That was it for the fantasy books on my TBR. Now we're moving on to horror/thriller. So I'm excited about this. I don't read too many thrillers, and I don't think I've ever actually read like an adult horror. First one that we have is Bloom by Delilah S. Dawson. I heard Ellen Catherine talk about this, and she got this recommendation off of someone else. I think it was Riley Marie. I heard that it's a fairly chill book, but then you get to the end and it's absolutely crazy, and I have a feeling that I know what this is gonna be. It's very short, so it would be very easy to get through. I also have a plan for this book to incorporate it in a reading vlog, so watch out for that. So I feel like this would be perfect to read around Halloween time, so in October. Next off, we have two thrillers, not horrors. The first one is The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. I have read one Riley Sager book, absolutely hated it, and I just decided, you know what, I'm gonna buy another one, because why the fuck not, you know? I want to give him a second chance, and this is a second chance. I hope he doesn't ruin it, because I read Survive the Night by Riley Sager. I'm not sure if that was his debut, but it was like one of the first books that he ever wrote. It was ridiculous. It was completely ridiculous. I was mildly enjoying it, but then the plot twist came. It was plot twist after plot twist, plot twist after plot twist, and not in an exciting way, but in the cringy way, in the way that it's so unrealistic that you're just laughing because of it. Yeah, so I haven't had the most positive experience with Riley Sager, but I hope he will redeem himself. I've heard positive things, but I've also heard a lot of negative things about this book. I just gotta figure it out for myself, you know. And I, of course, bought another Riley Sager book, yes. So it's the only one left. I have heard more positive things about this one. I think this is his most recent release, but also his most popular. That's not true. He released another book, but I'm not sure when that was, but it was somewhere in this year, and this one I think was at the end of last year or at the beginning of this year. It's supposed to be very twisty. I hope, again, that Riley Sager will not disappoint, because otherwise I'm gonna throw a tantrum. Bunny by Mona Awad. I actually did start this book like 2 years ago maybe, and I was enjoying it, but I just never continued it. Don't ask me why, I just never did. And this is like supposed to be like with a cult. It's basically about this cult that call each other Bunny, and they get up to some crazy shit. I've read some of it, I enjoyed it, but I never continued it, so I need to continue it. Next off, we have A Certain Hunger. I haven't actually heard the most positive things about this book, but I was really curious. It's about a cannibal who eats her boyfriend's women. Love that for her, love that for her. But apparently it's very repetitive, but I still feel like I would enjoy it even if it is repetitive. So now we're moving on to romance. I don't feel like romances are very fall-coded except for dark romances, so there are some dark romances on here. Also some like normal romances that I thought looked like fall romances, but this is probably not going to be accurate, but this is just what I want to read in the fall, so we're just going to ignore it. We're just going to ignore it. So the first one is a dark romance. It's Nightfall by Penelope Douglas. This is the 4th book in the Devil's Night series. I read Kill Switch this week. I'm just curious. I don't think this will be my favorite book in the series, but I do think it will be very enjoyable to read. Right here we have another dark romance, because why the fuck not, right? So we have Kingmakers Year 1 by Sophie Lark. This is also called The Heir. This is part of the Kingmaker series, obviously. I haven't read the Brutal Birthright series yet, and let me know if I should read that before I read this series, because I think I will, but I haven't heard the most positive things about those books, Jesus fucking Christ. But I have heard some better things about this series, and I'm just really curious about this series. There's also illustrations in this book. Like this is like the family tree. I wasn't sure what to categorize these as, but I just decided to put them in the romance section because they are romances, but at the same time, I'm not sure if they're fantasy or romance. Like, they could be both, I guess. It's The Shadows Between Us and the Darkness Within Us. I have already read this book 8 times. It's kind of ridiculous, I know. But I really, really love this book, and I haven't read it since 2022, I think. And I really, really, really want to reread it again, because I just really love this book, love the vibes that it gives me, love the feeling that it gives me. It just gives me so much happiness. But recently, this author came out with The Darkness Within Us. I have literally been waiting not so patiently for this book since I read this book in 2021, I think. Yeah, it has been a long time. 3 years. 3 years I've been waiting. 3 years I've been waiting. And now it has come out, and it has already been out for 2 months, and I haven't yet bought it or read it yet. Excuse me, Sarah? Babes, what are you doing? You need to buy it! But I love this book, and I hope I will love The Darkness Within Us as well. It's about the sister of the main character in this book. It just sounds so interesting, and I'm literally in love with this author, and I am just really, really excited to reread this and read The Darkness Within Us. Okay, now we're moving on to not so dark, fancy thing, romance. The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I've heard some people say that it's not fall coded, but the cover screams fall to me. Orange, or is this yellow? I think it's yellow-orange. Yellow, we're gonna go with yellow. But there are leaves, yellow leaves, and fall. Like, am I reaching for something that is not there? Probably. But to me, it seems like fall. So we're gonna read this book. And it also has been on my TBR for more than half a year. And I really need to read this book because I love The Dead of Romantics. And I haven't read this book yet. Like, come on, Sarah. Like, what are you doing with your life? One that I don't own is Wild Eyes by Elsie Silver. I have no clue if this is fall coded, but the orange on the cover, fall. Orange is fall. Black is fall. Yellow is fall. I really want to read this book, and even if it's not fall, I will still read it in the fall because I'm just so excited. I have read all of Elsie Silver's books except for this one. So we gotta do that, obviously. Those were the books on my TBR. Now we're gonna move on to the recommendations. I am gonna try and speed round through the recommendations and tell you a little bit about each of them, but don't ramble because that is what I usually do. First section is fantasy. And the first recommendation that I have is Throne of the Fallen by Carrie Maniscalco. This is the author that wrote Kingdom of the Wicked series. I read that whole series. I loved it. I didn't love the first book, but then the second and the third book were really, really good to me. And I originally DNF'd Throne of the Fallen, but then I continued on, and I don't know what happened, but I became a different person. And I fell in love with this book. Next off, we have Belladonna by Adeline Grace. I read another book by this author, All the Stars and Teeth. Was that the title? I'm not sure, but that's the other book that she wrote. I did not enjoy that, but this book was good. I don't remember what I rated it, but this is a YA fantasy. I loved it. This is about like this girl and she can communicate with the dead. That sounds so interesting, and it's so fall-coded. Once Upon a Broken Heart, this whole series. If you haven't yet read this series, what are you doing with your life? I kind of want to brag right now because I read Once Upon a Broken Heart when it just released, when it wasn't popular yet, when no one was talking about it. I read it a month after it was released because I fell in love with the Caraval trilogy. So I needed to read the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. And spoiler alert, I did not really enjoy the first book. And then it became popular, so I read The Ballad of Never After. I wasn't planning on doing that, but then I read The Ballad of Never After, and I completely fell in love. And that's that. I would definitely recommend the series. I would also recommend the Caraval series, but I think I would recommend the Once Upon a Broken Heart series a little bit more, especially because it's so popular, and that is why. A Shadow in the Ember by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I actually already talked a little bit about this. I don't remember much of it, but I remember the feeling that I got when reading it, so I just really enjoyed that feeling, and I still remember it. But for the rest, I don't remember shit. I read it on a summer vacation, but it gave me fall vibes, and I was there. I was there for it. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. If you haven't already read this book, go do that right now. It's really, really good. It's a very chill book, very relaxed up until the end. Then it gets crazy. It's basically about this girl, and she wants to be immortal. She wants to live forever, I guess. And she meets death, and he grants her wish or something like that, but with terms that she doesn't really agree to. So now she's lonely, basically. And it sounds very odd, but believe me, if you haven't already read this, go do that. The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. Witchy books. They are so good. I haven't read too many, so if you have any recommendations for witchy books, leave them down below because I love me some witchy books. I just haven't read much of them, but this one was one that I really, really did enjoy, and I did not expect that. This is about this woman, and she does magic online, and she's pretending to do like magic, like she's a magician, but she doesn't want anyone to know she's a witch, but she thinks like, okay, it's safe for that. And then someone reaches out and is like, hey, can you teach these kids magic? And she's like, wait, I'm not a witch. And they're like, yeah, you are. And she's like, oh crap. But then she teaches them, and it's a romance, it's a fantasy, it's lovely. Next section is thriller/mystery. I need to grab the books. I'm back with the books. I have already recommended this multiple times on my channel, I think. It's the Natural series by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. These are just such enjoyable mystery books. They are YA, So it's very easy to read, it's very easy to get through, and it's just such an enjoyable time. I rated every book 5 stars except this book, Killer Instinct, which was a 4.5, so still a very, very good rating. I was so surprised when I read The Naturals and it was a 5 star. I did not expect that, and then I needed to binge the entire series after that. And it's basically about these kids. They kind of work for the FBI to figure out cold cases, but of course they find a way to help with active cases because that's more interesting. And there's an underlying mystery in all of these books that gets figured out in the last book. Then we have A Dowry of Blood. I'm not sure what the author of this series is, but I read this, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't have recommended it. These are diary entries in the point of view of the wife of Dracula and how he, like, I don't want to say abuse, but it was kind of abuse, but how he treated her and how she thought of it. And every time she talks about him, she's like, you. So he doesn't have a name. It isn't specified if he really is Dracula, but it's very much implied that he is. And I feel like this would be perfect for Halloween, perfect for fall. It's just so atmospheric, and it's just so enjoyable. I really, really loved it. The Mindfuck series. I wanted to put this in the romance, but then at the same time I was like, okay, it's kind of more thrillery because it's about a serial killer, but also there is a romance. But I feel like the main focus of the story is the thriller slash mystery slash whatever. The tension, the gore. Oh my god, I loved it. And I'm gonna tell you something more. A serial killer, she gets with an FBI agent who works on her case. Anything more perfect than that? No, there isn't. I really loved this whole series. I read the first 2 books in a week, and then the last 3 books I also read in a different week, and I was just completely obsessed with it. I really, really enjoyed these books. And we have this series. Okay, this is also by Carrie Maniscalco. It's the Stalking Jack the Ripper series. Oh my fucking god. I'm sorry. I love this series so much. I need to buy new covers, by the way. I need to put them on my wish list. I'm gonna put new cover, because Stalking Jack the Ripper got a new cover. Like, this cover, it's not perfect, but gives me good vibes because I love this book. But this series, this is basically about this woman, and she wants to dissect bodies, basically. I'm not sure what the correct term for that is, but she wants to work with the dead. She wants to become a doctor, but in the time that she's in, it isn't normal for a woman to be a doctor or something along those lines, or like to work with dead bodies. Under the pretense that she's a boy, she works for her uncle. There's also romance in this, and it's just so good. Jack the Ripper comes along, and she's trying to solve this case of Jack the Ripper because he's murdering these prostitutes, and she wants to figure out who that is, and it's just so amazing. I loved it. I read this book 3 times. The rest of the series I only read 1 time. But I could ramble on about these books forever. But Hunting Prince Dracula, then Escaping from Houdini, and after that, Capturing the Devil. My least favorite of the 4 was Capturing the Devil, but I still really, really thoroughly enjoyed this book. I could literally talk way more about these books, but I'm not going to do that because we will be here forever. The last section is Dark Romance section. I only have 3 recommendations on here, because I haven't read too many dark romances, to be honest. Like, I've read some. I didn't feel like they were very fall-coded somehow. Count how many times I've said fall-coded, but I don't feel like they are very, have the fall vibe to them, but these do. So the first one is The Pucking Wrong Number by C.R. Jane, I think. This is very interesting. If you don't like this, that's completely fine. I was shocked as well. The thing that happened at the end, that made me lower the rating, because I was like, oh, this is so not okay. Like, it's a dark romance, but oh my god, this is so not okay. It's basically about this guy. He becomes obsessed with this girl, and that's the premise of the story. Next up, we have Ruthless Creatures by J.T. Geisinger. These books, they are so enjoyable. They are mafia romances. I don't know what it is with these books, but they're so easy to get through. I've read 2 books in the series, and I don't think I'm gonna continue with the series. Not because I didn't enjoy it, but just because I'm not interested in continuing the series. I'm kind of scared to continue the series because I feel like I'm gonna dislike some characters. Ruthless Creatures is a really good book, and I enjoyed Carnal Urges, the second book in the series, even more. I rated that 4 stars, but it had the potential to be a 5 star, but I ended up rating it 4 stars after all, because the personality of this girl, the main character in Carnal Urges, was amazing. But I feel like that kind of, because of the guy that she was with, the main character in that book, I felt like her personality kind of dwindled, if you know what I mean. She was like Willa from Heartless from Elsie Silver, but not the whole book, so that was disappointing to me. Lastly, we have Her Still to Take by Harley LaRue. This is not my favorite Harley LaRue book at all. I really enjoyed the Losers duet, but I feel like those are more summary reads, so I didn't add them to this. But it's basically about this demon, and he gets with this human, and it's just really interesting. It's really interesting. Do check the trigger warnings because there are some triggers in this. Check the trigger warnings for all of these books, honestly, because you don't want to be surprised when you come along a trigger and you're like, ooh, damn, I don't want to continue this. So do check the trigger warnings. Those were all of the books that I wanted to talk to you about. That was my TBR. Those were the recommendations that I have for fall. I hope you got some recommendations out of this video. If you did, mention what book sounds interesting to you. Maybe I can tell you a little bit more about it if you want. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, give it a like. If you want to see more of me, subscribe, and I hope I'll see you later. Bye bye.